Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at the solo and cooperative dungeon crawler Tales from the Red Dragon Inn. And disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this one. And I have an even bigger disclaimer for this one that I think is important to say, and that's that I've been playing this with my 7 and 10-year-old. This is the first game that they both played consistently with me. They are loving it. This is like the first dungeon crawler that my whole family is getting into. Is that fact, that experience going to color my review? Yeah, absolutely, but I still believe everything I'm saying. So let's get into it and see how Tales from the Red Dragon Inn stands up as a dungeon crawler. So first, my number 5 point, which is a full pro for me, is the accessibility in the game and the balancing across player counts. The game is open to several player skill levels and preferences, like my littlest is using a simple character like Gog, but then if you want to get more complicated, you can get somebody like Zot, who has tons of splash damage and has a little like helper ally to also deal with. But even with the simpler characters, they slowly add more and more strategic options, so all of them still have cool things to play around with, helping you to get into more complicated tactical headspaces. They have really good player count and difficulty balances. I've played 1 through 4 heroes and all work well. And the way the enemies spawn, not just how many of them are there, but like how close or how far they are, how quickly they'll gang up on you works really well. And even the true solo mode with a bunch of different companions to choose from to complement your hero's strengths and weaknesses so far has worked really well. The only weird part about this is that they don't level up as the campaign goes on, so instead the game just makes you stronger and stronger, which is totally fine and still works well for balance, but does mean that your companion will become less and less effective as the campaign reaches its conclusion. My number 4 point is also pro for my taste, and that's the enemy activation and initiative system. So first let me talk about the initiative, because there's a caveat here. This uses a bag-based initiative system where you pull the activations for different characters, so you're never quite sure when you'll go. And personally, I find this streamlined, well-organized, consistently tense, and exciting. The one negative of it is that sometimes it's a little bit harder to get combos together between your characters, because you're not sure when you'll go in a round. And sometimes the difficulty can swing suddenly in different directions if like all the enemies activate when they're about to attack you before you have a chance to kill them. So there are some potential concerns with the initiative system, but I still overall find it a net pro for the game and think it's fun. But then what I really love is how the enemies work. So you roll dice for them at the beginning of the round, so you know exactly what they're going to do, but the initiative bag gives you that lack of perfect information. You're not quite sure when they're going to do it. And just having the possibilities there in front of you and knowing which ones are more likely because they have more icons is great for your planning and tactics. And the activations themselves and the enemies are greatly varied. Like even the same type of enemy in a different scenario might work in a totally different way, which is why it's great that they have them just printed right on the boards here, making everything simple. Next, my number 3 point, which is another pro, there's a lot of them, is the campaign structure and the narrative. So first, the narrative, at least for my taste, is great. It's not too much reading, like you get about this much before a scenario and then a little bit at the end, and usually almost nothing in the middle. So the story doesn't break up the gameplay, which can certainly be frustrating sometimes with these types of games. The narrative is funny, but has like the right feeling of seriousness. I can compare it best to my usual Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, where like the players are kind of being a little bit goofy, but also we have like real important stuff to do in the world. But one of my favorite things about the campaign is the structure. So as you can see here, you have chapters in the game, 5 of them, each with 4 to 6 scenarios. And they really do feel like pretty much complete arcs. Like you'll meet some enemies, you'll fight them, some secrets will be revealed, and then you'll defeat them. So like after scenario 4 in this case, you've had a full fun experience, which is great if some players can't play the entire time, or you want to like kind of beat some stuff and then come back to the game later. It doesn't feel like an incomplete experience. It doesn't feel like if you stop after like 4 or 5 plays that like nothing's really happened. And again, players can drop in, drop out very freely. And like if you have the same players for chapter 1, but not the same players for chapter 2, you can just give them a TLDR summary and they'll be ready to go. So I think this whole structure works great, at least for my taste, where I don't like really huge campaigns. I mean, there are 25 scenarios here, so there is a ton of content, but it doesn't feel that long because it's broken up into these chapters. For my number 2 point, I'm looking at the characters and how you level up and change your abilities. And for this, I'm going to say it's barely a pro. This is the closest to a mix for me, and for others, it might be a mix or a con based on your tastes. So as I mentioned, you start with just a few cards, but you do unlock a lot more pretty quickly. But then they only give you the big unlocks of new abilities after each chapter. So you are playing through, again, 4 or 5 or 6 scenarios with basically the same set of abilities to choose from. Now, in each scenario, you're only going to use 4 of them, so you can switch out your options based on what you're going against. But again, you don't have like the really exciting, like big unlocks of new abilities except for every 5 or 6 plays. So that's the potentially negative side of things. I think that might feel a little too slow for some people. But the variety in the characters is amazing. The way they put really interesting, really cool abilities on each character as their basic stats, and then even had them change when you get wounded to kind of give you bonuses in some areas and negatives in other areas that work thematically. I think all of that is really clever, really fun, and again, also their ability cards are fully unique for each character, do very different things, so you really feel different when you play each character. And then the fact that you can switch in and out. Like, not everyone's going to like that, but I love that kind of thing. Like, if I'm getting bored with GOG, I mean, everybody's in the party, everybody's in the adventure, so if I suddenly start focusing on Eve for a scenario or two, and then, hey, I want to go back to GOG, and then, ooh, I unlock some new stuff, I want to see how Zot plays. Like, the game totally allows that sort of drop in, drop out kind of play. You're not attached to one character. Again, not everyone's going to like that, but for my taste, where I can get bored easily in these long campaign games, it's excellent. And that takes away any of the potential negatives for me of like having the same ability cards accessible to you for several scenarios in a row. So that's 4 pros in a row. So the 5th one is clearly a mixer or con, right? No. Again, I might be biased by playing with my kids, but this has become one of my favorite crawlers of all time. My number 1 is also a pro, and that's like a bunch of stuff lumped together, just the awesome tactical battle play in the game. So first of all, the abilities are so cool, and they have cooldowns or charge tokens, so you get to use them like 3 or 4 or 5 times in a scenario. This is not one of those crawlers where like your coolest ability only happens once. You are doing awesome stuff basically every turn. And so many of them let you move figures around the board, let you push them into traps, let you set up combos with the other players. Like, you really have an interesting tactical puzzle on your turn, and that is so supported by the different scenarios. I'm not going to go into too many spoilers, but just the difference from like the first scenario to the second scenario with the acid pools. And then the scenarios get way crazier from here. Like the one we just played yesterday had this amazing use of like knocking boxes onto people, blocking up their movement, and also doing a lot of free damage. Every scenario I've played so far has some cool like tactical puzzle element going on in the combat. Now, I do want to be clear that the scenarios are all combat focused. It is not like a game where like you're, at least I haven't seen yet, where you're like running away from enemies or something. These are all like dungeon crawler battle scenarios. So if you want crazy variety, you aren't going to get it. But yeah, like the combo of your abilities and what goes on with the scenarios is excellent. And then even though this probably should be its own point, I didn't have enough room, so I'm just going to throw it in here. The dice. I love the dice here. So first of all, they are super consistent. Like, no gripes about missing on your action or anything. Every yellow die rolls at least 1 damage. Every black die rolls at least 2 damage. Boom. That's it. You are never going to like have a missed roll, a flubbed roll. You're never going to feel terrible about your roll. But they have so many sides that are extra. These little exclamation points get you the epic dice. And then you can add the epic dice in extra rolls, and they just do so much extra damage. And you can like put that in your big area of effect attack and do crazy things. And then they have my favorite thing, exploding dice. Only for you. All the enemies just do set values. You never have to roll for the enemies. They're never doing annoying things. But yeah, when you get the exploding dice and you just go and you go and you go, and suddenly you're doing like 10 damage to the boss, it is unbelievable how fun and epic that can feel. So yeah, just the tactical picture, the dice rolling, everything about this game makes me happy turn to turn. I always feel exciting to take my turn. I never feel out of it. I never feel like I don't have that many options. It's streamlined enough for my 7-year-old to do cool stuff, but complicated enough for me, the heavy gamer, to pull off really, really awesome combos that take multiple turns to set up. So yeah, if you can't tell, 5 pros. I don't do that very often. Again, I'm playing this with my kids. I love it. But even apart from that, I got to say, I think this is one of the best dungeon crawlers I've ever played. For my taste, which is a very specific thing. And it is easily right now in the running for my top game of 2023. Like, I can't imagine it will be any lower than top 3 at the end of the year, even with the other great stuff coming. But you might want to check this one out if you like midweight dungeon crawlers, if you like campaign games but don't want them to go on forever, or want them to have like digestible chunks, if you enjoy a fun story and the feeling of a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, if you like tactical combat and fun dice rolling. On the other hand, you might want to avoid this one if you want super deep, like really complex characters and interactions. You also might want to stay away if you don't like crawlers in general, although even then I might give like one scenario a try if you get a chance, because I do think this does it so well. But if you want to see the game in action, I had a true solo playthrough a week or 2 ago, and then you can check the old preview playthroughs that we had for kind of more variety in scenarios. But thanks for watching, everybody. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.